Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sangham namasami. So I'd like to say a few words about the second and third meditation instructions given to us by the Buddha in the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta. These are in the section, the first foundation of mindfulness, body awareness. And the Buddha in the first meditation practice, ānāpānasati, gives a very subtle and profound teaching about breath awareness. Well, the second and third teachings, meditation kind of instructions from the Buddha, are about body posture, the four postures, sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. And then the third instruction is to observe, to be mindful of all the activities of the body. Sitting, standing, lying, walking, but also eating, drinking, urinating, defecating, moving, looking in different directions, carrying things, putting things down, and so forth. So putting these two instructions together, it's really possible for us to have a continuity of practice, isn't it? If we're able to direct our mindfulness to the second and third meditation objects, then we can be aware all the time of this body. It's interesting that these methods, techniques come after ānāpānasati, breath awareness, because actually it's a lot easier to be aware, isn't it, of how the body's held at this moment. Whether it's sitting or lying down, for instance, it's more easy to be aware of whether I'm speaking or eating or running than it is to watch the breath. So it's quite interesting that the instructions come in this order. These ways of paying attention to the body really give us the chance to make everything practice, to make everything a way, a doorway, an opportunity to develop sati, to develop mindfulness. To develop mindfulness with clear comprehension is the instruction from the Buddha. So we want to be mindful and we want to understand what we're doing, sati-sampajañña. We want to have a sense of, in a way, kind of purpose to the practice or right intention, you know. So I'm developing awareness in order to understand Dhamma. I'm paying attention to the body in order to appreciate this experience and what it can teach me, what I can learn from it, what wisdom can be developed. So with this kind of extra dimension, really, of understanding the Buddha's teachings, considering the Eightfold Path, Samasati, right mindfulness. It's also in the Eightfold Path, we have Sama Samadhi, right focus. We have Sama Vayama, right effort. So, you know, all of these factors come in, don't they? And then there's the right intention and right view, the wisdom aspects. All of this can be applied. And here we are, waking up to our experience. So focusing on this aspect of the four Satipatthanas, the body awareness, There's so much that we can observe in relation to postures and activities of the body. First of all, we can see how we use or how we hold or how we say make use of this body in our everyday life. How active are we? How do we choose to spend our time? What postures do we prefer? What postures do we neglect? Some of us are kind of have the tendency to be couch potatoes, and we love to sit and lie down, but we're not so big on walking. We can notice that. We can notice what happens when we sit for long periods without moving the body, what effect that has on the mind, on the heart. We can notice when we do walking meditation, how is it different from sitting? There's a kind of gradation when the Buddha speaks about the 4 postures. He gives them in a certain order in the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta. He speaks first of all of walking, then of standing, then sitting, and then lying down. That's quite interesting when we consider the kind of energy that goes into each of these postures. We can observe why we move, why we have the inclination or the tendency to certain activities in the body. What's the push? What's the intention? Why do we do what we do? We can notice that there's often a kind of emotional components or mood to different postures, to different activities. If a person is depressed, if we're feeling down, de-energized, we'll lie down. And oftentimes this will, it's like chicken and egg, isn't it? It's like, which comes first? If we lie down, we feel slothful. We might have low energy. And if we have low energy, we might lie down. And then you can get this sort of prolonging of the effect. We can notice that. We can notice how, as the Buddha told us, if there's a low energy, a slothfulness, the best thing we can do is move. Get up, stand up, walk about. Now, we talk about this in terms of meditation, but we can also consider it in our everyday life, in all the other aspects of our life, not just formal meditation. How do I use this body? How do I treat it? What's the kind of proportion of the different postures in this day that I've just had? So in this way, we're observing the way it is, and we're also able to kind of train ourselves or to observe the effect of what we're doing. We can also notice, right, with bodily activities, if there's some kind of hindrance playing out. Sometimes we can pick it up by the way we're moving or the way we're speaking. If I'm angry, my movements might be a little bit more rough, a little bit more hasty or clumsy or loud in some way. My speech may be a bit charged, a bit intense. If I'm afraid, if there's fear in the system, often there's a lack of movement, isn't there? There's a kind of like a freezing. We hold ourselves quite still and quite tight, as if, we want to disappear, we want to shrink. not to be noticed. We can observe this. We can observe when we're feeling confident, how we may sit straighter, stand straighter, swing our arms as we walk, be relaxed in our postures. So there's so much, isn't there, to understand and to see and to learn from observing this body and this mind and how they interplay and how our postures express so much, not just on the physical level, but also on the mental level. Dhamma, investigation of Dhamma, this enlightenment factor. Mindfulness is the first enlightenment factor. Investigation of Dhamma is the second. There's so much we can investigate. And as we investigate, as we explore the postures and the activities of the body, the more we focus on this, then the less we're distracted by hindrances, the less we're losing mindfulness, the more, in short, our mindfulness is strengthened. So let's keep investigating. Let's notice. And we can also kind of be creative around this, you know. If I have, for instance, the tendency to hunch over and just want to be invisible through fear or through, can be suppressed anger, it could be grief, bowing me down. If I notice that the posture is like this, then I can actually choose to change it and see what happens, to straighten up, to speak a bit more loudly, to hold my head up a little higher, to take a deep breath or two, and see how the mind changes. So we can learn about our habits, we can learn about our characteristics, our tendencies, and we can also let go of them. We can also expand into something different. We can experiment. When we're mindful, we have a lot of freedom, don't we? You know, we're recognizing that there's nothing that defines us here. There's actually nobody here. There's nothing solid or lasting. There's dhammas. There's behaviors, there's activities, there's postures. There's this body, there's this mind, constantly changing. And as we experiment a little, as we observe the habits, the ways in which we hold this body and use this body and experience this body, you know, we can start to recognize it's quite impersonal, really. There's reasons why I'm like this, why the posture's like this, why the belly is held like this, why the breath is like this. There's reasons, there's causes, and there's always the possibility to let go and to free up from our habits, our inclinations. Actually, you know, mindfulness of activities, mindfulness of postures, as we develop this, which we can do throughout the day, you know, we generally can expect to notice that the way we manifest physically is likely to become more refined. Why? Because we're being more mindful. Because there's this influence then when we're observing and watching and aware, you know, of this body and how it's moving. and how it's relating to the world, then we're likely to become more careful. You know, there's more care. There's more of an awareness of, say, the noise we might make as we move around in the house. And quite naturally, there's an awareness of that. And so there's an inclination perhaps to just not make so much noise. You know, in monasteries, we get a lot of teachings around how to open and close doors, to do so without making noise, basically. Because when we live with other people, isn't it, we do impinge on one another when we're noisy. If we are aware, are mindful, we tend to want to cause less disturbance, not out of fear or anxiety, but out of a sense of well-wishing and care. So we generally become more careful. And when we have awareness of bodily activities, postures, we're also more inwardly focused. So we're a lot less likely to be reactive. What is reactivity? It's the arising of hindrances. It's the arising in relation to something that's seen or heard or felt or thought. Something happens. Reactivity is there's a response, which is wanting or not wanting, you know, liking or not liking, wanting to get away from, wanting to move towards. Reactivity arises. Well, how does it arise? How does it manifest for us? It usually manifests in the body. So, you know, when we're aware of the body, we're aware of reactivity as it arises, long before we say or do anything. Angry, averse, you know, we're going to feel something in the body. And when we're aware of that, we can immediately give kind attention to it. And when we do that, when we're mindful of reactivity, what happens? You know, it's appeased, it's seen. It doesn't grow. It doesn't escalate. We're not caught up in the flood. We're actually observing, oh, there's an arising here. There's something hot and bothered arising. There's a tightening in the gut. There's a quickening of the breath. There's heat coming into the body. As soon as we notice that, then the situation will start to change already. So we will be less reactive. We will manifest less reactivity, and we'll experience less reactivity because we're at the source. We can catch, we can observe any kind of dukkha, basically, any kind of suffering as it arises. And as we pay attention, kind attention to any kind of suffering in the mind and body, then we see how they change. They resolve, these things pass, these things arise, these things pass away. We're not adding any fuel to the flames. How wonderful. So there can be a spark of reactivity due to past causes, and rather than adding suffering and heaping suffering on suffering, we're catching it, and we're just allowing the flame to burn for as long as it has the fuel from the past, from our habits, from certain causes, but we're not making it any greater. We're not adding to it in any way. We're observing it. The energy of observing, of mindfulness, is something like coolness. It's like, it helps to put out the flames, doesn't it? And so we can see the flame burning for a while, and then we keep watching, and what happens? It just goes out. So we develop calm, we develop peace, we develop a less reactive way of being in the world, you know. Our bodily activities, when we apply mindfulness to them, they become more restrained. And this quality of restraint is something very beautiful. And we can see it, can't we? We can observe it in ourselves, and maybe not so much in ourselves, but we can observe it in others. What I mean is we see more clearly looking at others. Sometimes in ourselves, we might feel very reactive, but others will say, oh, you're so calm. You're so peaceful. We might be boiling and bubbling inside, but so we don't necessarily notice our peaceful demeanor, but others will notice. And when we come across people who've been meditating for many years, who have a good meditation practice, who are mindful, in short, then often we observe and we're impressed by, and it's easeful to be around such people because they are calm and peaceful, and their bodily activities are more measured, more kind of efficient. We can also, through mindfulness of body in this way, in these ways of observing posture, observing activities, we can also become more efficient. You know, it's like when I brush my teeth, if I'm not being very mindful, it can be quite a, coarse, rough, prolonged process. Messy even. If one is mindful, brushing our teeth, we'll just brush them this much, just what's needed, with an economy of movement. I'd like to invite you to try and just observe if that's true for you, or with any other activity. When we're mindful, when I'm aware of using water, which I know is in, short supply in California where I am, when I'm mindful, I'll just use the amount that's needed. It's usually not very much. If there's not mindfulness, it can be a case of turning on the tap and loads of water running for no good reason. So, mindfulness gives us a degree of care, both for this mind and body, and also for the external world. Care, efficiency. We actually develop, as the Buddha tells us in the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta, through paying attention to posture, to activity in the body, we develop all the enlightenment factors. How beautiful. We develop mindfulness. We're investigating the Dhamma moment by moment, more and more deeply. We're also developing energy, the energy of applying mindfulness right here, the energy of restraint, bringing our attention, back again and again to the body, remembering to do that. Takes energy, takes effort. We're developing this enlightenment factor of energy. We can develop also a real sense of well-being in the body. Isn't it the case? I don't know about you, but I think many, many people experience meditation as something very soothing and easeful for the body. Just to be able to relax, muscle by muscle, mindfully relaxing. The relaxing actually happens of its own accord, doesn't it? If we just allow ourselves to sit, to meditate. It is so deeply easeful for us. And we can experience great well-being in this body and in this mind. Piti can arise. A sense of happiness kind of steals upon us as we meditate day by day. The feeling of well-being grows. And it grows both in the mind and also in this body, the way we hold the body, the way we treat the body, in just these ways I've been describing. We also develop samadhi, this enlightenment factor of focus, of stillness, of one-pointedness. We are training the mind. We are developing the mind. We are growing in peace and stillness. As we develop awareness of body, we're developing samadhi. We're developing concentration. This is hugely beneficial for us. We're developing tranquility. As I was saying, a kind of economy of motion, a kind of efficiency, a kind of restraint can come in as we observe this body through the days. And we develop equanimity, because the reactivity that's inevitable until we're arahants, you know, things happen, we respond in different ways. We are observing that. We're catching the responses, that little tightening of the belly, that little bit of tension in the shoulders that heralds some kind of reactivity, some kind of emotional flood about to spring forth. We can catch that, as I was saying. Equanimity is developed. This beautiful quality of being quite even amidst the ups and downs of life, being quite unshakable, not to be shaken, not to be, you know, buffeted by the winds, the worldly winds of liking and disliking, pleasure and pain, good and bad. Rather than being buffeted by these winds, we can stand very firmly, like a tree rooted in the ground. This body awareness roots us. It grounds us, doesn't it? We can stand firm. So in all these ways, I'd like to encourage all of us to keep developing our body awareness and let it be a practice that comes in all the time, in all that we're doing. Even when we're caught up in, you know, a lot of busy mental activity, working in an office, on the computer, you know, all sorts of complexity on the mental level for us in many different ways, perhaps, in our lives. Even then, can we take a moment from time to time, have a mindful moment, and just feel the body sitting in the chair, and notice the posture, and see how it might be that we're leaning forwards. It might be that our teeth are grinding. It might be that our belly is tight. We might be sitting in a really uncomfortable position and we just haven't noticed because we've been too occupied in some sort of headspace. Can we be kind and take a pause from time to time and just readjust, just to come back to the body and see what's needed? It's almost like we don't need to do anything, but the body will do what it needs to do. And we all know this because we all meditate. So just as when we're meditating, we allow comfortable posture, and we even, as we're sitting, we even improve on the posture and find ways to give the body more ease. So we can do this throughout the day. Just like in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, ringing the mindfulness bell every 15 minutes or so, I think it is. Can we do that too? Remember, sati, recollect, be present, be mindful, pay attention to the body, and see how we can develop continuity in our practice in this way. Amen. Sadhu, 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 sadhu.